Good evening. This meeting of the Coventry Town Council will now come to order at 6:01. Yes, I am.
Try again.
This meeting of the Coventry Town Council will now come to order at 6:01. Roll call. Mrs. Shockley?
Here.
Mrs. Lima?
Here.
Ms. Ludwig?
Here.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Here.
Mrs. Dixon here. Mr. LeBlanc, please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Mr. LeBlanc will provide the emergency evacuation plan.
Evacuation plan, please exit the doors to the rear, take a left or a right. You can also go out this door to the back and then to your right.
Thank you. The purpose of the meeting is to increase both the council's and the public's knowledge and awareness of the town of Coventry's financial health. No votes will be taken this evening. We're going to hear a report prepared by our finance director, Lisa Mills, and by our town manager, Mr. Marchant. Mr. Marchant and Ms. Mills will take questions during the presentation as it is being made. If you wish to make a comment, please raise your hand at your seat or at chat on Zoom. Wait to be recognized. If present in person, I will recognize you and ask you to come to the podium, state your name and your address. If you're on Zoom, Mr. Horton will let you into the meeting as you are recognized. Mr. Horton, do you have the presentation to share? Would you please share it now? Thank you. Could you turn the monitor so that people who are in the audience, can they see that one? Okay, is anyone who cannot see a monitor? Okay, great. Okay, Mr. Marchant, thank you so much for the work you and Ms. Mills have done in preparing this report for us. This is the first time we've ever had in recent history a report on the financial health of our town. We think it's very important for all of us to understand it, not only the council, but also the public. So Mr. Marchant, would you like to get started?
Thank you, Madam President, and good evening. This has been quite an exercise and study of all aspects of the town's finances, and it has been anything but simple and straightforward to put together. So please bear with me. I do want to take questions as we go through it because of the complexity of the issues, and I want to make sure that we can end tonight with everyone having a clear understanding of exactly what the town's finances look like. I don't know how far we can get into how we got here or where we're going. That will be a conversation for another time. But we will try to touch on some of those ideas so that we don't leave completely without an idea of where to go. So I want to start by talking about the fiscal health of the town and how we measured it, and how we're going to talk about the finances. So we have a few slides, including financial definitions of common terms that Lisa and I would use in talking about town finances that the general public might not be familiar with. I won't spend a lot of time reading all the definitions, but I might highlight a few. We'll talk about our liabilities. Liabilities are simply the obligations the town has to spend money. It could be for bonds, debts, contractual obligations, judgments, and court decrees, and long-term contracts. We'll talk about the net position of the town, our budget capacity, our debt limitations, our debt margins, bond debt service projected out to the year 2039, the town's bond rating from Moody's, and our potential future obligations that all have an impact on our current financial wherewithal. And then we can talk a little bit about some ideas to improve our fiscal health. So next slide is the financial definitions. Our general fund is the primary fund that the town uses to operate all departments and expenses. There are some other funds, but they are all much, much smaller. The largest of which is the sewer fund. It's run as an enterprise, like a business unit, so it is kept separate. And even though the sewer debt isn't part of the general fund, we will mention it tonight as part of the whole picture of the town. And then there are several smaller, much smaller funds. But to the extent that they're so small, they don't represent a significant part of our overall financial health. Assets are things that provide current, future, or potential economic benefit for a municipality. It could be cash. It could be taxes to be paid this year. We're anticipating the revenue from taxes or fees or fines and forfeitures and that sort of thing. So we budget for those based on year-to-year experiences and our tax rate and our fees. So we kind of have an idea of what to expect. But it also includes fixed assets like buildings, vehicles, and things that might last longer than a single budget year. That all goes into our assets. Liabilities are the things that cost the town. I mentioned that before. It's what the town owes, usually in terms of money, but it's also the upkeep on buildings and maintenance of equipment. As you know, you have an asset, but it also incurs a liability because it takes money to operate it. Now, ultimately, the net position of the town is all of our assets minus all of our liabilities. And are we in a positive or negative position? And when you put it all together, where do you end up? This measure can change over time, but it's a useful indicator of the government's overall financial position and its ability to sustain financial services into the future. It is also useful in assessing the municipalities' financing requirements, and it goes into our bond rating, which is our credit worthiness for debt issuances. Page 4. I did read the ones on the previous page because they're really important. They're the high level ones, but GO bonds are general obligation. That's what the taxpayers are committed to pay for. School improvement bonds are incurred sometimes through other means for school improvements. They're not necessarily a general obligation bond, but the town still has to pay it. Notes from direct borrowing can occur when we enter into a loan agreement with a lender. It's not a bond, but there are other sources of credit and lines of credit. Bond premiums, capital leases, the pension funds. We'll get into all of this. And certainly if anyone has questions about it later, we can refer back to these definitions. I have made the slides available on the town website, so anyone can download it and look at it in more detail. I know it's difficult to read off of the screens and sometimes on your computer because you can't zoom in like you'd like to, but they are on the website for anyone that would like to review these as we go through them or later. Page 5. This is a list of our general fund liabilities as of June 30, 2020. We have outstanding general obligation bonds of $31,645,000, school improvement bonds of $9,595,000, notes from direct borrowings of $832,576, bond premiums of $1,246,386.
Could you give a better definition of bond premiums?
Yeah,
I read it, but
I was dreading that question because it is a little esoteric and difficult to understand. But essentially, if you get a market rate bond for $5 million and then you get a discount on that bond, a rebate or something, and so you knock off $500,000, you still owe that $500,000 to the creditors, and that's a bond premium you pay to true up the bond, but am I getting close?
Yeah, it's actually very close. And then just the cap is, the bond.
Get the microphone in front of you to make sure that's.
So that was correct. Just one thing to add is that the bond premium is as it states, right? So the taxpayer or the investor will pay a premium interest rate, so a higher interest rate. So you in totality are going to pay the same principal, but the bond, the investor is going to get a larger sum of interest income.
So why do we have them? Like, what are they on our books? Why do we have?
Because it relates to the bonds. Okay, so when the bank is going to issue a bond, so basically when any bond that is sold, it's sold to an investor at a certain interest rate. So we have non-taxable bonds and we have tax-exempt bonds. So with that interest rate, is the ones we are particularly talking about is some that have premiums, is when the investor is paying a premium interest. So it's interest expense to us, interest income to them. So does that make sense?
So they bought our bond, so we owe them interest for having made that purchase.
So it's
This
just
is interest we owe on the fact that people have bought bonds we've put out on market.
it's a premium above a typical bond for that period of time. So it's a premium interest. So if you look at it, and I'm not explaining it well enough. So if a normal bond is like 3% and an investor is getting sold this tranche of bonds, this will be like 4.25%. So that's a premium. They're getting a premium interest income. Therefore, we have to pay.
Yeah, they're making some money for having bought the bond. We owe them
Right.
that money. Okay, I can do that.
All right. I think another way to say it is if the going rate's 3%, that's market, but then to sell it, you're actually selling it for 4.25%. The premium is that extra you're paying for when it actually gets sold in the market. All right. Capital leases. The council's gotten really familiar with them in the last few meetings as we have capital leases to pay for large equipment, and it's kind of an open line of credit with a certain creditor in order to buy large capital items like heavy trucks and equipment. Pensions, these are obligations the town has to its former and current employees for their retirement. Many of these pension plans have changed over the years, and they accrue a huge liability that the town has to pay when these people retire. Many of the town's employees and prior employees were on what are known as defined benefit plans. And that's a guaranteed benefit and income regardless of what happens to the stock market. And the town and the taxpayers are going to owe that as these employees retire and collect what they've been contractually promised. Newer plans and some of the employees have been moved on to what is called a defined contribution plan, where at the time they're employed, the town puts in money, the employee puts in money, and however that grows, that's what the employee gets. And it's no longer the employer's responsibility to worry about how to pay for their retirement, because whatever's in the pot is what they get. So those are obviously more affordable, long-term and sustainable, but the town still carries a couple of defined benefit plans on the school department and in the police department.
Ben, just a quick question.
And the municipality.
Could you just name the plans? I believe there's 4 of them. And then just quickly talk about the health of each plan.
That's on a later slide. If we can save that for a later slide.
Sure.
Great.
That works.
Compensated balances. This is a liability that's somewhat, it's kind of a stealth liability. It's hiding under the surface because this is all the vacation, sick time, and COVID compensation time and comp time that has accrued on the books that we only pay out either when they use it or when they leave. And the biggest liability is when they leave, because then we have to pay out the entire amount at one time when someone retires or resigns. And that's a pretty big hit. So if all the employees were to leave tomorrow, that's the number we would owe cash to send them on their way, aside from their salary and whatever else is lingering out there. So it's a big amount, and we're going to want to look at trying to manage that better in the future. And claims and judgments are court orders, consent decrees, state mandates, the Coventry landfill, the maintenance obligations on that. So our total general fund liabilities that we have outstanding is $243,158,319. It's an extraordinary number in proportion to our annual budget and our tax base.
Just one question. Do we have any way of knowing how that compares to similar municipalities in the state? Like if we're astronomical, if that's where everybody else sits, or?
Okay, I'll just say it would be really nice if every other town did a fiscal health plan like this so we could compare, but Lisa can.
I can elaborate a little bit on that. So if you could go to any municipality's financial statements and look at the net position statement, and I looked at a couple of them. Portsmouth, for instance, is roughly 88, I think it's 88 million negative, at same as East Providence, it's about 80 million. So proportionally, if you look at the population, East Providence I believe is fairly close to this municipality. The differences are quite large.
Thank you.
But I mean, excuse me, when you said it extraordinarily large compared to budget and tax rate, is that correct?
Yes, and other yes, yes, Miss Ann. Also, in addition, if you to other municipalities, okay. So if you look at East Providence, I looked at East Providence and Portsmouth, and we are significantly large in the red at a larger degree. So, I mean, we could put together something for the 39 municipalities and look at that, but I'm sure there's some that are doing great, and I'm sure there's some that they might be looking like us. I don't know all 39, but I just know up to.
I understand what you're saying. I'm more concerned about how we are doing versus how we are compared to other people, because we're here to manage and be fiduciary responsible for the budget for our particular town and our expenses. So we can carry on.
And just one more thing.
Yeah.
You mentioned the general fund is separate from the sewer fund. So this is not including certain debts. This is just including
Correct.
debts that we pay out of our general fund.
Correct. I do have a slide on that can show that. So we are aware of it and we're taking it into account. But just looking at the general fund right now, going to slide 6, this is just a bar graph showing how all of these liabilities stack up to the 243 million. It has grown over the years from 2018 to 2019 to 2020. And our financial statements for 2021 are being compiled right now. So we don't have that. We have an idea of it, but we didn't include it in this chart because we're still putting a lot of that together. On slide 7, this is where we're looking just at the pension funds. The red is the police pension. The orange is the teacher's pension. They are in the state MERS system, ERS. The purple is the school resource pension for school resource employees. And then the teal green color is the rest of the municipal pension.
Questions on this, Mrs. Shockley?
Yeah. So I'm wondering why in this fiscal year, so Fiscal years are always kind of wonky to think about, but it looks like our debt, our liabilities and our pensions went up during that year. I know COVID happened at the end of 2020 and the market went down at that point. And I'm just sitting here thinking, did I forget about a year in the world? But so would that be a reason for that? Have more people retired?
That could be it for police, but for teachers, it actually went down. And we have a couple of different dynamics. When you're looking at pension and retirement actuarial reports, they're balancing new retirees coming in that are adding to the expense at the time they retire, as well as members that have been in retirement a long time and pass away coming off of the liability. So based on that population fluctuating, becoming larger or smaller, it nominally can go up and down from year to year.
Yeah. And well, the teachers going down is actually part of what concerns me about the others. Only in that I know that the pension fund for the state did quite well in that fiscal year. And I'm not sure how the pension investments for the police and the municipal, the SRP employees did. So
This is the contractual obligation, regardless of.
well, we have to
Could you
pay
speak
into
into the
it
mic,
based
please?
on, usually you make an assumption and you see how the investments did and you determine what your ARC payment is and what you owe and what the total liability is. So if the market did well, you have less of a total liability. The fund itself is worth more.
Yeah, as the fund grows, that reduces your unfunded liability because it's funding itself by that growth. Same as if you have less payout, less members, because the pool shrinks, you have less members to pay. You can also increase your funding percentage in a couple of ways. But conversely, if your population grows, a lot of people found that, COVID, I'm home all the time. I have these projects. I might as well retire anyway. You could have a bump in retirements. You could have a number of dynamics that are all happening that make this too complex to really say for sure what's happening. But we see it in the numbers that things are moving.
So Mr. Marchant, I do have a question. We talk about, or people talk about, the police pension being the worst funded pension in the entire state. And we talk about, Mrs. Shockley referred to the ARC. So could you explain to the public what is meant by the ARC, how that is determined, and then and how it's computed? And then let's look at the police pension and under what circumstances will this ARC grow? In other words, the amount of money that we need to pay into this particular pension. And the last question, which is all related, under what circumstances will the pension fund for, say, the police go into default? And what would be the town's obligation then?
Okay, so that's quite a lot of questions.
Well, I can take them one at a time.
I'll try to go through them.
Start off with what is the ARC?
So the ARC is the actuarial required contribution. So an actuary does a study of our pension fund, the number of employees and members that are receiving a pension, and how much the town's obligation is going to be. And they determine an amount that we need to contribute to the pension fund that is equal to or greater than the amount of funds going out each year, so that we can have a minimally funded fund. Ideally, it's going to be more. We're putting more in than is coming out because we also have to fund the future retirements of all these current employees. And so they determine what that minimum contribution is. And, the town has improved its position somewhat over the last 8 to 10 years, where it was only 9% funded, and today it's 23% funded. And 23% funded is still the worst funded police pension in the state of Rhode Island. So we're not out of the woods yet. You asked about what does it mean to default and how could we get there?
Yes.
And hopefully we never get there, but conceptually it would be, you have members in the plan collecting benefits, and for whatever reason, more of them start living longer And so we have to extend the amount that we estimated we'd need for more people. We also have more people retiring sooner and collecting sooner. And so you can add the expenses, and as the expenses grow, our funded portion of the plan diminishes because we're eating up the savings we have in the retirement account. And when that gets to zero, you have zero in your pension account to pay the pensions, but you still owe it. And so really, even at 9% and 23%, we're almost as a pay-as-you-go plan where we have no savings, and it's really up to the taxpayers to keep up with the tab on paying these benefits out to these former employees. Sure.
I just want to add a few comments to this. So there's other factors, right? So we have people different age. The factor when they're going to retire, when they come into the plan, and also very, very important is the rate of return on these investments. So if they don't fare well, and each pension group is invested differently. They have different sets of classes of assets. So based on a factor of their age, the age of these people retiring. So you don't want to, so when you have a large group of employees going to retire soon, you tend to put into a more conservative investments. I also just want to point out that the reason why, and I don't think most of the public realizes that the reason why most of these pensions are so underfunded, and it's happened to various towns, is that prior to 2014, there was no requirement to put on the financial statements the liability of pensions. There was no actual requirement to make an ARC payment. And GASB incorporated the new rules, and they had to be followed, that all this documentation with the census and everything, and determine what an ARC payment would be and what the liability is if X amount of people retire at certain ages. So that.
Say what GASB means.
Oh, Government Accounting Standard Board. Sorry. James knows that one. So that's really important, because that's when, if you look at the actual reports that are on our website, you can see that 2014 is the start of all these reports. And that's, at one point, the police department was only funded at 12%. So what I've talked to staff that were here is, in those years in 2014, when the budget was tight and everything was cut, these pension payments were not paid because there was not a requirement at that time. So that's why the town's in a difficult spot.
We are currently making our ARC payments, I assume, just
Yes.
based on the fact that we're
Yes.
increasing our, for all plans.
Yeah, since 2014, the town has gotten on a kind of a fiscal recovery program with the ARC payments. And, Lisa and I meet quarterly with our investment advisors to review the pensions and talk about their target investment goals and how they're invested and classified. It is a diversified portfolio, and we have some more conservative investments and some more aggressive ones, all as permitted under state law. Municipalities don't get to take big risks in the stock market by law for good reasons, but then you don't get the big gains either. So as far as we're going, we have a target return of 7%. I think that's maybe a little unrealistic. So we've been advised to consider reducing our target to 6%. And that reduction will increase your liability unless the market outperforms your target of 6%.
That's a double-edged sword.
It is.
Because you want to make sure you're paying into these pensions and we're giving people the benefit that they've accrued, but a 1% change in what our assumption is of what the market will do, that'll be a drastic change in the ARC.
So is the town's vision that we will just keep up with whatever the ARC payment is that is required, or that we have a plan to try to eat away at the liability that we do have?
There's two parts to that answer. Part one, yes, we're doing it as much as we can right now. Part two, we need a plan. We don't have a plan per se yet. Lisa and I have ideas for plans, and we've been discussing it, but we really haven't had time to dedicate to that project with everything else we've been doing. Lisa's either been building the budget, doing the 2020 audit or the 2021 audit since I started, and there has nothing else, even this was a big distraction from her other responsibilities, but this was just important enough that we need to know where we're at to know where we're going.
So, Mr. Marchant, can you just stay on that topic for a few minutes? So currently we funded the 23.46%, for example, on the police pension. So let's just say we come up to this year and you make and actually, what is the arc on that, the police pension?
It's about $6 million.
Okay.
Is what we pay into the police pension each year.
So if, for example, regardless of what we do for budget next year, if, for example, for whatever reason, you decided to not do what we did at least the year prior to put in, is that something that you can make a decision on yourself, or does that come to the council?
Yeah, the ARC payments are legally required.
I'm sorry. So let me try this again. We are making the minimum ARC payment.
Yes.
Is that this exact number? Because I thought we said we were above that, right?
What number are you using?
I'm just using the police pension as an example. So the fiscal year 2020, 23.46%.
That's how much the entire fund is funded. And that's not the same as the ARC. That's not what we're putting in.
So what we put in, so I'll forget that number for a moment then. So what we have to put in for the year, we're still above that. So who decides whether we're going to match that for this year or slightly under or over?
Well, so that could be a budgetary policy decision of the town council that we could decide in next fiscal year to budget more than the minimum. And, that's going to be kind of with a whole, every other budget request that we have, every other line item, the school, the town, and how we kind of judiciously decide where to allocate funds and where not to allocate funds. And with as tight as the budget has been, we really haven't had the luxury or option to fund more into the ARC payments. This year in particular, we cut everything for capital projects out of the capital improvement plan. Some of the capital items got put into department operating budgets, so we're still able to do something. But if you're not funding your roads, you're not funding your infrastructure, the maintenance of the facilities, schools, municipal buildings, those are clear and present needs we have day to day. And so it's hard to not fund those in order to put more money into a pension fund that doesn't deliver daily services. We're paying for former employees' obligations that we have. So
in order to make the minimum ARC payment or to change from that would come to the council before we made a decision to change that.
I'm not sure you can
Yes.
change the teachers.
So-
So it's in the state plan.
So can we just, can we just expand on this a little bit? So everything Mr. Marchant said is correct, but the ARC payment is literally the annual required contribution. So that's minimal. So that's not escapable. The discussion on whether the town council wants to budget more than the ARC is definitely a decision that needs to be looked at because we're severely unfunded on these pensions or there's other options that, like Mr. Marchant said, that we've been discussing that hopefully we can look into. But just looking at the total in Ms. Shockley's statement, about the teachers, even though that's not a defined benefit plan per se, it is, but it's managed by the state. What was contributed per the footnotes of the financials was 5.1 million just for the teacher's ARC payment. The police, this is for FY20 because this is the most completed financials we have. And 5.6 for the police, which right now for FY21 was 5.9. So that went up quite a bit. OPEB 1.2, which is for other post-employment benefits, which is basically medical expenses that we agreed to pay for these retirees. 1.1 for our municipal employees here at the town hall. And the SRP, which is the employees for the school department, other than teachers, is another 1.7. So a total of 14.9 million just for FY22 on the minimum ARC payment, which is 20% of the budget.
Well, ARC plus, okay.
Yes, well, because it's a retirement benefit, so 20% of the levy, I'm sorry.
20% of the levy goes to
Goes right to that.
these expenses.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we went down the road of pensions. Now we can go down the
Well,
road of
I will
bonds.
suggest that we take a pause because we've had a lot of good question and answer with the council, but if there's anyone in the audience or online that
Good.
wishes to raise their hand, I think we could take a break to catch anything we've missed.
Any questions from members who are here in the council chambers with us? Mrs. Patino, please come forward. State your name and address, please.
Hello. I just have one question. I'm not sure, I understand that we have to pay a certain amount of money for the teacher pension, certified staff. I'm not sure why that's an unfunded liability to us, because as long as we pay whatever the state tells us, I don't know why that's part of the total of unfunded, because,
So
yeah, well, yeah.
it's the same predicament as the DV plans managed by the town, I guess, or our investors. It was never fully funded. And so that's, if it's on the financial statements,
I know that it's never been fully funded on the state side, but if the state defaults, if the state
So-
can't pay, does that mean that somehow we're going to have to pay more?
yes.
Is that what the deal
So
is?
as of, on page 65 of our financial statements, as of today, the Coventry School District proportionate share of the net pension liabilities regarding only the state, the teachers, is 63 million. And the state's portion of net pension liability that they have not funded is 47 million,
I know.
for a total of 110 million not funded for the teachers.
Kathy,
Oh, sorry.
what the state is doing is they're trying to get an ARC payment so that by, don't quote me on this year, 2036, the teacher's pension should be fully funded. So
Okay.
they're having an ARC payment based on a assumed rate of return, and then what the pension is actually doing in performance. So every year you get a different ARC payment, but their plan is to have you pay that so that by, and once again, 2036 is what I think the year is, the teachers' pensions and state pensions should be fully funded.
Yeah, but I just always thought that it was our police, basically, municipal and the uncertified staff at the school that actually impacts.
Yeah, from what I
Coventry's
understand,
default.
even though we're in the state
You know, if we
system,
ever defaulted.
even though we're within the state system and they're managing our investments for us, it's still our debt. So we still owe all these teachers, even if the state system says we're breaking up, everyone gets their own pension back. We'll owe we'll be 54% funded for our teacher pensions.
I mean, wouldn't that just mean that every city in town would basically go bust?
Yeah.
Okay, just checking.
That's a
And
question for a
basically,
different
therefore, nobody could ever borrow anything again.
Well,
we'd be
we all
so in
have the
debt.
debt though. So even though I
know we don't have
it, it is still our debt.
Okay.
It's the town's debt, even though it's within the state system.
Okay, I think.
This is a national issue. This isn't just Rhode Island. Many states are dealing with this across the country. I haven't been in many places that still had defined benefit plans because defined benefit pensions have been completely eliminated in most public sector or private sector businesses, and most of public sector has been weaning off of them over the years. We've been having conversations over the last few months during police union negotiations, and the police pension was one of those sticking points that it's a really big priority for the town to do something with it. And it's a very big concern for the police officers that they don't lose any benefits on it. So it's a very difficult situation. And we kind of punted on the issue to buy ourselves some time because they are very much interested in, getting out of a municipal plan and going into the state plan. But we're going to have to take some time to study that issue because even there's a couple criteria. Going to the state isn't a catch-all silver bullet because one, the state pension system may not let us in. Or they may require us to be fully funded to come in, which puts us in the same predicament we're now, where if we have to be fully funded, we're not getting there. And so we're going to have to think more creatively about these problems and how we get to solutions. It's unlikely that we're going to find a money tree or a grant source that's going to magically solve our problems with 50%, whacks at a time. It's going to be this slow, steady finding a percent savings here, a percent savings there to start building up that fund until we get in a better position. So even though the teachers are in the state, we have obligations to meet that, and the state can dictate to the town how much our ARC payment is going to be to meet our share of that expense.
Mr. Horton, is there anyone?
I think
who's-
there was another question.
Was there?
Senator Rogers, I think, had a question.
I did it first. There's so much I could get into, and if I get out there, I'll be there. I come from municipal, and I could go on for hours, so I'll just hold back for now.
Well, you're here to participate, so feel welcome to come. Ms. Horton, is there anyone on chat and Zoom who wants to ask a question? Yes, raise your hand. If you're on Zoom, please raise your hand so that you can participate and ask questions.
Doesn't look like we have anyone for now, but we'll do another check-in in a few slides. So moving to slide 8, this shows, and I apologize again, we were on 8. We're going, wait, no, were we on 8? Oh, we were on 7. Now we're on 8. And this is showing our bonds in this bar graph of general obligation bonds, 31 million, school improvement bonds, 9.5 million, and then smaller amounts for bond premiums and notes payable. The numbers are listed at the bottom in the table. As you can see, the principal amount, the liability fluctuates as some years we pay more down and other years we take on more debt. That's kind of the nature of government, where you have projects to do from year to year. And it's not a straight line reduction like having a single loan that you're just paying off. I did get a request from Councilmember Lima, and I provided a sheet for the council members that I can also add to the website perhaps tomorrow, which lists all of our debt issuances, all of our bonds, a summary of them, and what they were for. The 2015 general obligation bond was for town equipment, town repairs, and refunding of a 2014 debt issuance. The 2011 GO refunding for the Coventry landfill and the judgment of 2.4 million. Work for Upper Dam Pond, the recent rehabilitation of the police station and human services complex. The original, the 2019 GO bond for the police station and human services complex. So there's been a number of debt issuances over the years, like I was describing.
Mr. Marchant, please read the total.
The total of general outstanding principal is $42,072,576.
I just want to mention that, yes, it's 42,072,76. Just to clarify these descriptions, the GO bonds are typically under code section 45-12-2. All the other bonds are not under that code section, but they're considered bonds and are in our debt book. with the exception of the bond premium is not technically considered a bond. I think that's all I was going to add. Oh, these are, keep in mind also, this is just the principal. So like similar to what if you had a house, right? So you would have a principal payment. This doesn't include the interest that we're going to pay on this. This is just the principal. And we get later on in the charts, I believe it's page 14, you'll see the total debt service that's required.
Mr. Marchant, could you just, on the back of that page?
Yes.
There's also the sewer debt.
Yes.
Can we just quickly talk about that as well?
Yeah. So on the back of the page, we do have a number of debts that have been accrued under the sewer enterprise fund. And the total for the sewer fund is $16,026,000. We have additional debts that are not held on the town of Coventry's debt book because they were actually issued by West Warwick as part of the wastewater treatment facility. But we still owe a portion of that debt through them. And so that's another $5,166,925. So our actual total sewer debt that we're paying on is $21,192,925.
So I know this is just maybe being negative, but the town and schools put together, we have $42 million in bonds. The sewer, we have $21 million in bonds. Okay.
Yes. The sewer fund is treated separately because conceivably it's supposed to be able to manage its own expenses and come up with a plan to pay off its own debts and be independent of the general fund. However, the town owns the business. And so like if you owned a business that was going under, you might have to take cash out of pocket to put it into the business to prop it up or keep it alive or meet your obligations. And the town's in a similar position where right now the town pays $200,000 as part of its share to the sewer fund. And it could be a lot more at some point if the sewer fund isn't able to improve its situation.
I do have questions about the sewer fund, but I noticed that there is a slide.
Yeah, we can come back to that.
Want to come back to it?
Please.
Okay, I'll wait. I'll hold my questions for now.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to the net position of the town. When you're trying to accumulate funds in a piggy bank, it's like someone left the spigot open and we're draining it faster than we can fill it.
Did you find this on Clipart, this picture?
I did. It made me laugh and adds a little levity to this very heavy conversation.
It does.
This is a table that's going to be harder to read unless you can get up close and look at it online. But this lists our assets. Our total current assets for 2020 is $96,454,980. Some of these are cash, some of these are equipment. And so it's not actual cash we have on hand because you'd have to liquidate a lot of it in order to get that value. We have deferred outflow of resources. That's potential revenue that we haven't collected yet, that we anticipate that because we anticipate it, we book it and we can attribute that we actually have total net assets of $125,159,325. But then when we look back at our liabilities that we just went through and the deferred inflows, things that we owe, our net liability is $261,492,124 for a net position of negative $136,332,799.
So please explain the significance of this number.
So if we were to go out of business tomorrow, liquidate everything and get rid of everything, we'd still owe $136 million. And our taxes, if we closed all the schools and the municipality, all your taxes that would come in for the year wouldn't be enough to pay half that. It would take 2 years of no services and no schools to actually pay it off today. That's not realistic. That's not how things work. That's not how things happen. But it is kind of a reality check, a gut check as to just how much we have hanging out there more than we've brought in. There are a couple of ways that we looked at showing this number for ratios, just kind of putting it into context. With 12,000 residential taxpayers, it's $20,000 per taxpayer. We could look at it as a percentage of our assets. Everything we bought, we owe 150% on. We're over leveraged and we owe more than we have. And the only way to get out of that is to better manage our resources. And we'll get to that in another slide as well.
Thank you.
So this chart just shows the comparison of our net assets to our net liabilities, or our total assets to total liabilities. The blue bars are fiscal year 2020. On the far left-hand side, we're looking at our total net investment of capital assets. The second one over is our restricted funds. The third is the big unrestricted deficit. And the last one is our total net position on the far right. And you can follow in the numbers table, the assets, the deficits, and our net position.
So can I just ask if I'm correct that over the last, from 2018 to 2020, our net position has increased?
Improved. Yes. We improved by $6 million. And that's a positive.
We're at least starting
going in the right
trend that's
direction.
going in this direction as opposed to coming out of a deeper cliff.
With a good plan and a responsible management and budgeting, we hope to accelerate that savings.
And that's what I'm wondering too. In the past 2 years, has there been a plan that has caused this pay down?
I wasn't here to speak for it,
I wasn't
so
sure
I
if
don't.
maybe you could tell.
I don't imagine that there was. I think this is more happenstance of.
We could use
Okay.
luck.
Yes, I'll defer to the finance.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I can answer that question. It's just literally just bonds, certain bonds falling off. That's basically what it was. So some bonds being paid off, done, and the bond payments being reduced. So it's nothing that we actively did. It's that some bonds are towards the tail end or paid off.
That makes sense. Thank you.
All right. So that's pretty much the ugliest slide of the night. Hopefully we can turn the corner. But that is what we're dealing with. Slide 10, slide 11 now. I want to talk about our budget capacity. And, this is looking at our total town budget. This pie chart shows that roughly, 28% is for the town operations in all departments. The other, what would it be? 80% is the school appropriation from the town. The school receives a good tranche of state aid. The school has some bonds and other miscellaneous income for the school. The green sliver is the important one I want to draw your attention to, because that represents the maximum 4% levy increase that the town is able to grow its budget by. And a 4% increase for fiscal year 2023 would add almost $3 million to this budget pie, with which to fund operations, ARC payments, liabilities, whatever it may be. So as you can see, it's not a lot to work with, but it's what we have to work with, assuming the voters would pass a 4% levy increase.
But just to be clear, every expense you've shown us tonight is a fixed, like this is an expense we have to pay every year. These are bonds.
Yeah.
These are liabilities that we have. It's like your mortgage
Everything
or
up to this slide. Obviously, with the municipal budget, you have some ability to cut your costs, reducing your services, reducing your employees. The school, you don't have that option because of the state law mandating minimum maintenance of effort. And so on the school side, I think that's why there's such an interest to do a performance audit, because I want to have a performance audit for the town because I see it like a sponge and I want to see just how much I can wring out of it. And until we do this study, we don't know where other savings opportunities are. And if you've never done a performance audit, or if you've never looked at how you could do things differently and save money, there could be a lot of untapped potential within the existing budget. So just conceptually, if we could achieve a 10% savings on the town side, that would be an extra $3 million we could have to throw into streets or other programs. For the schools, out of 5 million. So if we could get an extra 5 million for the schools, that would more than cover their maintenance requirements and actually allow them to get ahead on some of their capital improvement projects, which they've haven't been able to fund like they'd like to. So I think the ability to squeeze our annual budget is one of our best opportunities because it doesn't represent a tax increase. It just is looking internally to find value. Going on to slide 12.
Just want to pause a moment. Any questions from members of the audience? Okay.
So slide 12 talks about the town's budget limitations. Oh, we have a hand. Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Menier. Please state your name and address and ask your question.
Larry Menier, 170 Richardson Road. Who does a performance audit and how much does it cost and how do the mechanics of it work?
We currently have a request for proposals out, and we don't have any costs or mechanics at this point. We just have an idea of the information we would like to get from a performance audit.
When are we expecting those responses?
They're due this Friday, the 17th.
So this is the meeting that we're having on the 27th, and we've invited Chairperson Patnode and the school committee to join us so that we can discuss this in an open session with the public as well.
Would you mind giving the residents some ideas of what we might be looking for? Do we have any of that information we could put out?
Yeah, we have the request for proposals published on the town website, so anyone can see what the town is looking for by way of a performance audit. But typically a performance audit's different than your annual financial audit, because the annual financial audit only looks at your financial statements and whether they're being reported accurately. But from a performance standpoint, we would like to have a company come in and review our financial controls. Do we have more than one signer for checks and for wire transfers? Do we have controls, and do we have a process for purchasing so that it's verified that every expense is legitimate? And do we have, you could look at your staffing levels. Do you have adequate staffing, or are you overstaffed? Are you meeting your mission and purpose for these various governmental programs? Are you following the state and federal mandates? It could look at a lot of different things.
Why wouldn't we want to do that, I think, is the real question. So I believe most of us, maybe all of us, have expressed not just an interest, but a prioritization of getting this on the agenda. And so I think it's extremely important for us to have the discussion. I'm looking forward to discussing that with the school committee on the 27th. And I'm really hoping some of the residents here tonight will join us as well to learn a little bit more about the RFP, et cetera.
All right. Okay, I'll go back to slide 12. So this slide is really interesting because it's kind of putting together our annual budget with our debt obligations. And we mentioned it earlier, but here it shows the first pie chart on the left are our annual obligations for debt as a percentage of the 2020 tax levy, which was 28% of our tax levy out of our budget of 72 million was for pensions, OPEB, bond payments, and other liabilities. Another way to look at it on the right is our annual obligations as a percentage of the total budget, not just the levy, because the total budget is taxes plus all the other revenue sources that we can possibly have coming in, including from the state and the feds and grants and fees and fines and that sort of thing. So there it looks a little better. It's 19% of our total overall budget. But that's still a pretty big percentage if you're putting almost 20% of your income into debt. Slide 13.
What's recommended? Just for curiosity. I mean, there's ridiculous examples of when you buy a home.
Right. Your debt to income ratio for a home, 30%, 33%. There isn't, I don't know that there's a standard for municipalities. Some communities have a lot more capacity. Maybe their debt to real estate value is such that they could afford to take on a lot more debt, or they can afford to pay more cash. Some municipalities adopt policies of zero debt, and so it's all cash, pay as you go. So it's really more of a policy decision, but I'll let Director Mills add.
So just to add on that, so our debt to asset ratio is, if I'm recalling, I did this at my first town council meeting here. I believe it was like 0.64. Ideally, you want to be from 0.28 to 0.60, and we're over the range. So in Mr. Marchant's going to get into this debt margin that talks about some of these limitations from a state level.
Oh, please come forward to the podium, state your name and address.
My name is Ted Beasy. My property is on Northrop Road. I have two questions. One is the capital listed on the assets listed at depreciated value?
Yeah.
And if it is, isn't the actual value quite a bit higher?
So I can answer that. So yes, it is recorded at the financials are the capital assets are net of depreciation. Yes. Is the fair market value greater than the actual asset? That would have to be, that's another type of Jacobs report that I would strongly suggest we do, because there's a lot of repairs that when we go into each building, excluding the schools, that are not done. So I can't say if we look at from an insurance level, what we're insured for it's certainly higher than the net depreciable value. So that the answer to your question would be yes, but there's still more repairs. Yes.
I was just trying to find a tiny bright spot in that.
It is a bright spot. Good job.
Very appreciated. If we sell them, it's a real good job.
And then my second question is, have we tried to, does it make financial sense to refinance? It came up with this, what do our bonds amount to as a proportion?
Yeah, that's going to be on the next slide after next. So,
but there was a question about what usually happens, and I wondered if there are restrictions in the bonds that we've
some. It's
so yes, sir. We're going to get into that later on the next couple of slides, and Mr. Marchant's going to talk about what we've been actively doing in that arena. We have pursued the bonds that are what they call callable, and those are the only ones we can refinance, and we are looking at that right now, and he'll get into that later.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, so here on, yes, let's see if we can get back. Yeah.
I did that, sorry.
The back arrow, it's not going. Okay, oh. There we go. So the debt margins, the legal requirements under Rhode Island general law, effective January 1st, 2008, a city or town shall have authority to incur debt for money borrowed through the issuance of bonds if such application for approval of bonds is approved by the Auditor General as described below as meeting all of the following standards. The city or town has, and I underlined these parts that I think are extra important, a long-term unenhanced credit rating from one nationally recognized credit rating agency in at least the A rating category without regard to gradations within such category. So our credit rating with Moody's is in the A range, so we qualify. The city or town has represented in the application that the proposed bonds will finance a capital asset or assets, and the average useful life of the capital asset or assets to be financed will be greater than or equal to the average maturity of the proposed borrowing as determined by an appropriate official of the city or town at the time of the issuance of bonds. Therefore, under this section or notes therefore under. Just you can't borrow more than the useful life of the thing because they don't want you to have something that you owe on after it's gone. Okay. The city or town is in compliance with financial reporting requirements as set forth in 45-10-5 and is not subject to the enforcement proceedings or remedies as provided for in 45-12-22.7. And authorization for the
Mr.
issuance.
Marchant?
Yes.
So just to confirm for this one, is sending in financial statements late to the state, is that something that counts against us in something like this?
No. We're not penalized for being late. We could be, but not necessarily in this case for debt margins. Okay. It really is looking at whether we're actually filing our financial reports.
Okay.
The authorization for the issuance of such bonds has been approved by local referendum at a general or special election or financial town meeting. So the debt limit is calculated by taking the gross assessed value or the taxpayer's property less the exempt property in the community and 3% of that. So from 2022, the town of Coventry has a gross assessed value of $4,176,557,769, of which $173,675,332 is exempt through the tax freeze or other exemption programs that the town has. So our total taxable assessed value is $4 billion. 3% of that under the state of Rhode Island debt limit is $120 million, less the general obligation bonds that the town already has of $28 million. That leaves Coventry with a legal debt margin of $91,701,473. That is basically available credit that we could use, but to use it would indicate that we're maxing out our credit line. Director Mills has more to add.
So just to add to this debt margin, I think it's prudent to understand that if we're looking at 6/30/2020, because you guys have all the information for that, and that 31 million ties to the GO bonds, they're not subtracting out the other bonds, which are the school improvement bonds and the direct borrowings, which were used for town roads and buildings. So it's a little bit kind of understating all the bonds. So for this provision, it's only the bonds under 45-12-2. These other bonds have been passed under a different code section. So therefore they don't reduce our debt margin. So it's a little bit deceiving to think that we have the full, if we're looking at 6/30/20, it says 72 million we have available to use for bonds. It's a little deceiving because we have an additional if you look on your schedules that we have sent out, we have a 9.5 million for the school improvement bonds. We have bond premiums, and then we have what they call notes payable, but they were for the roads and buildings, and that's another 832. So in theory, we have 43 million of bonds for 6/30/2020, but per the Rhode Island General Law 45-12-2, not all the bonds are included in there. It's important to know. So it's not, when you say this is your credit, your available credit, they're not including all the bonds. And so what happens, and I've talked to our bond financial advisor, and he said that that towns actually skirt around this 45-12 and actually pass a bond under a different special election or different code section. Therefore, it doesn't hurt their margins. So just an FYI on that. And even once you take even if you left the 72 alone, we still have all those other liabilities we have discussed in the past. So we really don't have 72 million to increase our debt.
So I'm trying to understand what you said. I mean, if we looked at 7/30/2020, it says that a legal debt margin is about 72 million, correct?
Correct.
But that does not include a calculation of all the other bonds that we also owe on both the principal and the interest, correct?
Well, correct. So if we look on that schedule, I'm not sure which one the bonds are.
Sounds like a pretty arbitrary law.
So if you look on what was that?
It just sounds like a pretty arbitrary law.
I know.
Because
If you
they
look
made the law and they know everything you just said. Like, we're learning it and I appreciate the information.
And here's the thing on page 8, if you look on your page 8 with the bonds, you can see that 31,645 ties in perfectly to what we're subtracting for the legal debt limit. And it doesn't include all those other bonds. Okay. So, and here's another interesting, this law was passed prior to the requirements for unfunded pensions to be recorded on the books. So this doesn't come into this calculation. So interesting timing of these different laws.
All right. Any questions on debt margins and debt limits and debt ratios?
I'm sorry. So as a town council, when we have to make decisions, I mean, is this a reliable number to use, the 72 million?
I would say that as a good rule of thumb, but you yourself are going to have to take into account the additional 10 million in debt and your pension liabilities and ARC payments to determine the total picture of what you can actually afford. I would say I think for me, it's really easy to think about when I was a younger family man and we had all our credit cards maxed out and we had just enough each month to make all our minimum payments. And we're really excited about next month getting that raise. And then come to find out the raise wasn't quite as high as I was expecting. And then getting a loan offer. Well, technically I could squeeze that loan in, but is it a good idea? Probably not. And, everyone manages their own finances differently, and digging out of debts is not easy. It takes a lot of discipline. I've had my ups and downs, and I'm happy to say I'm out of those problems, and I'm not quite hand to mouth like I was earlier in my life. But all those experiences kind of go to inform just your approach to managing a budget, and managing a budget for a town and a school system is far more complex and impactful because you're affecting a population of 5,000, 6,000 kids. You're impacting a population of 36,000 residents. And these services are things that touch people every single day. And so you do want to try to satisfy every need, but you're not going to be able to satisfy every want.
Can I just ask, just kind of to create some logic for myself on this? Whenever we do a go bond, we put it to the voters because we're going to levy it, correct? And some of these other bonds you're talking about, they don't have that specific income flow. So when you put a levy on for a go bond, you're saying this is how we're going to pay for it. correct? So my assumption is that that's why they pull it out, because you've also created a cash flow
Well,
for it?
I don't know that the town has any levies in place for any of these bonds. I think all of these bonds are being
'Cause they're
paid
tax
for
bonds.
directly out of our general fund annual tax levies.
Right. Just to clarify, all these bonds that we have on this schedule on page 8 are go bonds per se, but they're not go bonds under section 45-12-2. They're passed under a special election, and there was one other rule that they can be passed under. So they don't quite fit under this debt margin definition, but they're all go bonds. They all had to be passed by referendum by the taxpayers. The sewer bonds are a totally different animal. They don't have to get passed by the taxpayers, and it's based on enterprise. They're supposed to pay for themselves, and they're also taxable bonds as opposed to our municipality bonds are tax exempt.
Just to quickly go to page 14, this shows our debt service for the town and the sewer bonds. These are from our debt book. And this does show the total liability of principal and interest payments scheduled out to 2039 for the GO bonds and 2035 for the sewer fund. So including interest, our debt service will be a total of $47,786,244 for the general obligation debt. And for the sewer, it's $22,330,132. So the net debt service is the total we'll actually be paying on those.
I just want to add something on, just so everyone understands, on the net debt service for the sewer. You will see a state credit, a negative amount. So what that is at that one point in time, a particular bond was what they call refunded or refinanced, what people are familiar with. So it was a reduction of the interest we had to pay. It doesn't go to the state. It's kind of labeled as state. That's the way the bond advisors classify it as such, but it's a reduction of our interest expense. So it was a favorable refinancing in the past.
And RIIB is Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank?
Yes. And those are fees.
Yeah.
You're looking at the fees?
Mhm.
So we pay RIB fees at 50.50 basis points. So they typically provide us a lower interest rate than let's say other banks, but they will in turn charge a fee. But it's, I didn't do the analysis in the past, but typically it's still a plus with a lower interest rate.
I can't really tell what this number is 0.5% of.
Yeah, it is 0.5. Yes, 0.5% basis points.
Well, 50 basis points?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just 3,515. It's a very small number in comparison to.
Not all of them have a
Oh, 0.5%. Sorry. You know what? You were telling me and I wasn't hearing. I didn't move the decimal point enough. Sorry about.
How many bonds are dropping off our debt service in 2038 that we drop from 791 to 420 like that? Do you know off the top of your head?
So, yeah. You have it. Hold on for a second. Summaries. I should have put this in there. I didn't know I had to put too much information, but so when our 215 go bond is dropping off in 2035, 211 go refunding is 2027, 16 is 2036, 17 is 2037, 19 is 2039, and we have one school improvement bond dropping off this year, 2022. And the next school bond is dropping off 2033. And then we have the 2 rib notes that are for the town roads and bridges. Those are dropping off 2035 and 2030 respectively. So we really have one bond dropping off, $1.3 million, and that's dropping off this year. And the rest, the next year, something drops off is 2027.
I don't think it's in the rest of this, at all in this presentation, but would we be able to see a forecast of what this would look like if the proposed school bond passed?
I have done an analysis. We didn't really get into that for this presentation because we're just
I
talking.
figured, if
Yeah.
there's a point before.
So to look at that interest rate, to look at the municipal bond advisor has already ran those numbers, and I know what they are for interest and housing aid. They will be significant, higher than the 3 million that would increase the taxes for 2023. The first 3 years, we will have I think it's 2 or 3 years when they're doing the construction, it'll be interest only. And then it's the first few years, it's fairly large. I can't tell you the top of my head because I wasn't going to discuss that, but
If at some point we could get those publicly, I think that would be helpful.
absolutely.
So, Mr. Marchant, may I ask a question about the sewers? If we look at this enterprise sewer fund, is that sewer enterprise fund considered in the black right now? Sometimes I hear black, sometimes I hear red. I'm
well-
not sure where we are.
So, it has this $22 million debt liability that it's carrying, but it's operating to its annual budget this year had a deficit of 330,000, and it has reserves to offset that this year's debt. I think that's the next issue that I have on my agenda to dig into is develop a stronger fiscal plan for the sewer program and look at how it needs to be better managed in the future.
So if the town, just say, for example, based on what you know now, if the town approved a plan for sewer expansion, not saying that we're doing it, we have no plans, there's no approval. I want to put that in capital letters, not saying how much, when, where it's even going to be done. How would getting a bond for sewer plan be impacted by other debt that the town may incur in the future?
It's completely separate.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be impacted. And a sewer utility, like an electric utility, gas utility, water utility, anything else, is all a numbers game and economies of scale. The more accounts you have paying into it, the more the costs are spread out and the more affordable it becomes for everyone. Unfortunately, the town of Coventry's sewer program never got past the critical threshold of being completely able to afford itself and solvent. And so, we're stuck in this twilight zone, no man's land, where we didn't go far enough, and it's not quite viable to. It's a stick in the eye that no one wants to invest in more because it's been so painful. But if you just get over that hump, it all gets better. And so for the program to get better, if we could double the number of accounts, right now we have 1,800 accounts out of a potential 14,000 that are conceivably serviceable under the facilities plan, it would be more than solvent. And that would be a really good plan, but I can get a lot more detailed as I dig into it in the future.
Well, I know you've been very busy and that is on your agenda, but I just wanted to raise that because I wasn't sure how this account in any way would affect us doing anything else for bonding.
Yeah, two separate funds.
Yes.
Two different, but let me just expand a little bit on what Mr. Marchant said. Currently, we have a fair amount of sewer bonds, and we have to meet a 125% of revenue to debt payments. It's very critical that we come up with a plan to bring in more revenue, because if we don't meet that percent, they become callable.
And just because it's not in here yet, but I do feel it's part of our current financial picture. If we chose to use COVID funds to move forward some sewer projects, that would be something that would fall under the purview of COVID funds,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
And do you know what we have for COVID funds?
What we received so far is roughly 6 million. And it can be used for water and sewer. And I think it's a very good gift for the town to to come up with some plan to get more of these sewers out and bring in some revenue. We have the capital now to move forward with that, but we got to be careful because we have bonds that if we don't meet that equity ratio, we could have some issues.
Yeah. So putting some money in now.
Correct.
So that we don't get a bond called that we can't pay.
Right. And I mean, we could get into, I know Mr. Marchant's going to get into the refunding issue, but we have one particular sewer bond that qualifies for refinancing, but we cannot do any refinancing because the sewer fund is not generating enough revenue. So it's sort of like, it's unfortunate. It's at a higher rate, but we'll get into a little bit more of that later.
I just would like to clarify. I know Member Shockley asked about COVID funds, and we said that we can use them for sewer infrastructure. But I just want to make sure the residents know that it doesn't mean that they're going to get free sewers.
No.
All it means is that we're not going to loan that money from Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank to fund the projects. The residents are still going to get assessed.
Right.
And until our ordinance changes, they're still going to get assessed between 20 to 40,000, if not more. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Well,
so I don't want to rush into a sewer project until the ordinance is addressed. And then number two, I know you said that the sewer debt is separate. However, we're already funding 200,000 of general funds into the sewer fund.
Yep.
We also can't control when upgrades have to happen at the West Warwick treatment plant that we don't own a penny of. It's not on our financial statements, but what we do own is the capacity. Yep. And because of that capacity, in 2015, they did an upgrade for $12.5 million because upgrades at a treatment plant are very expensive. And because they decided to do that, we owed $2.7 million because of our 21.38% capacity ownership. So I think we do have to be concerned about that debt. So just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you for bringing that point.
Can we ask one more question? But how do we account for that debt? Like, how do we put that as
well? That's accounted for in the sewer fund, and that's part of our sewer plan and our financing for the sewers.
So, for example, you'll have a line item that says, projected $2.5 million 10 years from now for likely updates.
In theory, yeah, we would have all of that included in the plan. We're due to do an update of the sewer facilities plan, and we'll be getting fresh numbers and looking at all of this hopefully in the near future. All right. Credit rating. So with all this debt, it's important to understand how our credit rating agency, Moody's, evaluates the town's finances and determines where we stand. I'm just going to read the highlights from this report. The town's credit strengths is that we have a trend of stable general fund and school unrestricted fund operations. We have an implementation of our pension funding plan, and we have manageable debt and OPEB liabilities. I think that's very subjective, but that's considered a strength. Our challenges, however, are the sizable outstanding loans from the general fund to the sewer fund, the elevated unfunded pension liabilities, and the tax base only recently recovered to pre-recession highs. So they're looking, and this is how they're evaluating the town. Factors that could lead to an upgrade of our credit rating, material repayment of general fund loans to the sewer fund, surplus of operations leading to strengthening reserves and liquidity, having a material decrease in pension liabilities, and significant growth in the tax base. Some of those things we may be able to influence, some of those things we may not. But factors that could lead to a credit downgrade is failure to restore balanced self-supporting operations within the sewer system, a decline in financial reserves and liquidity, underfunding the pension liability, and or a tax-based contraction, and material growth in debt or the other post-employment benefits burden. So the decisions we make directly impact our credit rating and our ability to get good loans at good interest rates. So right now we have an A1 rating, which is fairly decent, but we are concerned about keeping that rating intact. And between the factors that lead to an upgrade versus the factors that lead to a downgrade, I'm more pessimistic than optimistic. And so that's definitely an area to watch. Slide 16. So this slide shows our potential future obligations. So we've only been talking about what we owe so far. This slide shows the 2016 Jacobs report on the facility conditions assessment of the school buildings only. Ms. Mills just commented recently that it would be good if the town undertook a Jacobs report study on the rest of the town's facilities. But just looking at the capital improvement needs for the schools, we have a total need of $75,772,582. That's to correct all the recognized deficiencies as of 2016. And we know that a lot of those deficiencies haven't gotten any better, and a lot of them haven't been addressed. And so that's one set of obligations that we may have to pay regardless of whether we want to or not, just to make the facilities functional.
Mr. Marchant, I don't think you can answer this, but maybe I see Mr. Murray in the audience. Maybe this is something we can cover when you join us later this month about which of these items are likely to be covered in a possible school bond. Maybe not necessarily wiped out, but I'm assuming that many of these might go away.
So we could, that could be part of that later meeting.
Mr. Murray, would you like to speak? Okay, your name and address, please.
Luke Murray, 121 Farm Camp Road.
I don't think it's on.
I turned it off. There we go. Luke Murray, 121 Hill Farm Camp Road. So yes, it would be something that we would cover directly. So we'll address what is being done under the proposed bond versus what we had under our capital list. So you can see side by side what will be addressed, which is substantial. You'll see that a lot of our capital improvement needs fall off the list from the Jacobs report, which was essentially updated in our stage 1 report to RIDE.
Okay, thank you.
Quick question for you, Mr. Murray. The school bond, wouldn't that be for the middle school though? But this listing is saying for the high school, we need like 38.6 million. So I don't know how the bond would cover the high school.
It won't. So there's much more need than that. So we'll get into the nuances at the meeting of what the Jacobs report covered. A lot of what they said was warm, safe, and dry. I will tell you some of it is a bit subjective on what was needed. Also, keep in mind, we have addressed some of these needs through COVID funds. So things like HVAC, where we've made major investments in recently. So we have done some of these improvements as we go strategically to some of the facilities. So that I hear you. And I think that would be good. I can meet with Mr. Sands to see what's been addressed over the past couple of years since Jacobs, because Jacobs is getting a bit stale at this point. It's a few years old, so we can update our list of what's been done off that list from Jacobs.
Thank you.
Yep.
I think there was a concern, Mr. Murray, because this list that came from the Jacobs report has numbers in it that far exceed what is, I think, proposed in the bond. So perhaps you can discuss that in the next meeting. Okay, thank you.
So we also have potential future obligations on the municipal side. For Department of Public Works, 10,586,029. Parks and Recreation, 2,284,000. Police, 580,000. Town Hall, 200,000. Other financial investments and needs of 490,000. So the town CIP, and this has to be just like a couple year period, 14,140,000 of needs. I know our 5-year CIP was closer to 48 million. And these are projects that aren't getting done and aren't funded. But so with the combination of what we owe and what we still need to do, we feel a lot of pressure coming for even the planned and anticipated expenses, and we don't know how we're going to fund those.
So, Mr. Marchant, I do have a question on this. Is this like what our immediate needs, for example, that the department heads have provided you? First of all, when was this list updated? And is this their like a 5-year plan or 1-year plan?
So it was updated for this year's budget. It was a 5-year plan. And I think this 14 million represents what was proposed for inclusion in this year's budget. In the initial budget presentation, we had allocated 500,000, and that was later cut as we reduced the levy amount for the final budget.
Could you give us an idea of what are some of the projects included within some of these departmental needs?
Sure. So we can start with the police. The police department, administrative vehicles, vehicles for the animal control facility repairs, a boat, back roads, recreation. We have field lights. We have basketball courts. We have community center repairs on the garage, repairs on the playgrounds, Raven tennis courts, which we just approved in the last town council, so we can take off 100,000. So what else we got here? Infield groomer with attachments, concession stands, and obviously the biggest piece is DPW, and this is what they gave me. So it is out 5 years. There's a lot of vehicles, dump trucks, of which a handful of we just approved in the last couple of town council meetings. So that's about 200,000. And then we have chippers, we have storm drains, we have road improvements, we have upper pond dam stormwater treatments, mill house. It goes on and on. Gatehouse replacement. Let's see, snow plows. I can forward this to you. We have townwide resurfacing project, which is 1.2 million for 5 years.
Okay.
So that sums up a bulk of it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. That gives us an idea of what's included in this, and it's a 5-year plan. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Go on to the next slide. We're getting close to the end here, so hang with us. The potential future obligations of the town. This shows it in a pie chart, like Ms. Mills said. Department of Public Works is 75% of the needs because they do our biggest construction. She said 1.25 million for roads. That was intended to be per year so that 250,000 could go into each district each year. And it might not actually work out to be exactly that way because road projects are usually more than 250,000, but there is an intent that we can spread out the investment in roads equally throughout the town. So going to slide 20, the fiscal health of the town is critical. We have some major expenses, liabilities, and we're just about drowning in our debts. The annual budget is anemic and already does not fund all the required capital improvement projects. When projects don't get addressed, they get worse and become more expensive. I've seen this most clearly with roads. When you pave a brand new road, it's beautiful, and best practices say that you need to chip seal it within the first 5 years. That gives it an extra 7 years of life to the pavement because you're sealing the top layer of asphalt. And over time, as those roads, you start getting cracks. I'm sure you've been on roads that you can describe as alligator cracking. And that's just going to open up holes for water to seep into, frost heaving, and bigger potholes come later. The worse it gets, you go from being able to do a chip seal to a slurry seal and just filling the crack seals to resurfacing. And then it gets a lot more expensive as you do the full road reclamation and you have to dig it all out, redo the base, redo the road. And that's the most expensive. So I would love to have a plan where we could get ahead of our expenses by just doing the affordable maintenance. I think in the budget process, I use the comparison of maintaining your car. You can save some money not doing oil changes, but you're going to pay a lot more for a new engine later if you don't keep on the cheap maintenance. The debt capacity is available, but must be used judiciously. And the unfunded obligations threaten the town's ability to continue providing services at the current levels and may have an adverse effect on our bond rating.
I believe that Senator Rogers, do you have a comment? Please come forward, your name and your address, please.
Senator Gordon Rogers, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Senator Gordon Rogers for the district, also a highway director for the town of Foster. Been involved in municipal a long time. Learned a few things when I became on a highway director. You discussed doing a audit or investigation on how to save money in certain areas in the town school and the town side. One thing I did when I got a highway director, and you just pointed out you're going to be spending like relatively $250,000 in all the districts. What I did and the town of Foster did is much like a plan that you needed. We sent an RFP out. There are companies out there that will come in and they'll score and grade every inch of your roads. They'll give it the square yards, they'll give a length, and they'll score it. And they'll give you examples of, they'll give you a rating and a cost benefit analysis. If you do this road first with sealing, you can improve your score. So I would recommend going out to a company like that. It costs the town of Foster, we're not as big as Coventry, but
We just approved it.
They approved it last month, the expense. So we're on our way.
okay, so you're going to send an RFP out. That's very important. And I was pushing that through your director to get on board with that, to push that, to get ahead of the infrastructure money that's coming from the federal government. So you'll be shovel ready. I front loaded mine and then I went and told everybody else because I didn't want to have all these companies busy, but it will do you good and you'll be able to leverage your capital. One question I do have, again, for municipal, how do you have a capital? How do you fund your capital projects through your budget?
We don't.
All right.
So we fund it through the general fund. So, but this year, we did not fund any of the capital. So usually, and I haven't been here too long, but every other year they do 200,000.
All right.
So it's very a drop in the bucket of what's really needed.
And that just started a couple
So
of
may I recommend a plan on that also, that I learned things from other towns and steal some of their good ideas. And we actually had one in Foster, and Ms. Mills will know what I'm talking about. We are underfunded on how we do it. And we've been fighting with charter amendments to increase the percentage. So what the town of Foster does, when you go out the bond, you want to go out the bond for the big things, the big school improvements, the big police stations. But when you do fire trucks, police cruisers, roofs, that should be done through a capital budget plan and a fund set up in the town. What we had done years ago in the town of Foster, and once it's implemented in the budget, it's already built in. You're just moving forward that. We, for years, do a 2% transfer of our total budget. So whatever our levy is, that also increases every year. So as our budget goes up, our capital fund goes up. And we've been doing it for quite a few years. And we don't bond nothing out. We
How
pretty
does
much
Foster vote on their budget every year?
financial town meeting. So,
The same way we do.
correct.
No, they do a financial town meeting. We used to do that, and now we go to an all-day referendum.
But they,
Those are the dynamics, but at the same way, it's the plan that would be put in place that you would have to sell as a council. So
They're
you,
very different.
well, they're not. Approving it at an all-day referendum and a financial town meeting really is and is not different. What I'm trying to explain is something set into your program that assists and I'll go into saying how you can start implementing it. You have multiple issues you're dealing with, and basically slide 5 shows you where your big problems are. But what you would do, and I would recommend, is you know how the state started the private weed where the levy was dropped and it capped out at 4%, much like Massachusetts, 2%.
No, it's not like Massachusetts. Massachusetts lets you
Proposition 2
build
in
off growth.
Massachusetts.
Massachusetts allows you to build off of your natural organic growth, and then you have a 2%
Yeah,
cap.
but they call it Proposition 2. It's the same.
They're very different.
Senator, I'm not sure if you remember this, but back in February, we requested some help with this. So maybe we can talk offline about
We would actually
addressing
love to
that
talk
at
to you
the Rhode
about that.
Island level.
On a state level, you're not going to get much help. I'm telling you that right now.
But we could try.
Every year
I think just the knowledge from as many representatives as possible
Right.
that Massachusetts
I'm
and Rhode
trying
Island
to-
do it very
We're
differently
getting off
is
the
really
track here. I'm
important.
trying to give you an idea of the capital improvement plan. And what you would do, I would recommend, is try and get a capital improvement plan and start it, whether you want to start funding it at 50%, but set a goal with a 5-year or 10-year plan to get at 4% for a capital improvement plan, which now you can fund the little things like the roofs, the police cruisers, the sanitary trucks. That way you're not struggling and cutting, because pretty soon that train's going to hit the end of the tracks. And what's taking hits, and you're going to have to take a lot of hits, is the capital improvement plan, where these trucks ain't going to be able to go down the road next day, or the police ain't going to be able to go down. So you need to implement a capital improvement plan that you can fund and set it forward. That's just advice. I've been saying it individually. Now I'm saying it publicly, that's something that I see that towns do that is effective to help them.
We would love to talk to you about that 4% cap,
Yeah.
because I think with the organic growth Coventry could have over time, that would be a humongous help without having to levy our individual citizens more.
That's just a one-time jump, and then it falls back into place.
That's how it works now. But
Yeah,
in
it's a one-time
Massachusetts, it
fix.
doesn't work like that.
affect you moving forward, though.
I'd love to talk to you more
Yeah.
about that.
But again, take into consideration the capital improvement plan, because I see that's a problem here. So
thanks, Mr. Rogers. We agree. I mean, I think all of this stuff that we've been going over with the town council here is for management to put a priority on how we're going to go forward, because I don't think in the past, these type of projects and the totality of everything, there's not even a Jacobs report on all our buildings, only the schools. So there's a lot of work to be done.
Thank you for your suggestion. I think you voiced that opinion at another meeting that we did have, but we appreciate it. We're listening. Thank you.
All right. Hopefully now for some good news.
What is this? 2 more slides? Is that the good news?
That's right. 2 more slides. That's one piece. I'll take whatever I can get.
See, our audience really doesn't know how many slides there are.
There's only one more after this one. So the number of ideas we have for improving our fiscal health, obviously increasing revenues. Taxes are a weak source of increasing revenues because we're capped at 4% and whatever the public will vote on and approve. Fees are mildly interesting because they are somewhat more flexible, but they're limited in scope. You're really not going to get a lot of mileage out of fees. Grants are really attractive. They're just very scarce and usually not in the amounts that you really need to make a big impact. Of course, the federal funding that has come and is coming is our best hope for some serious help. But even what aid we have, 6 million pales in comparison to the obligations that we're still facing. So we really need to make the very wisest, best bets and capitalizing on the return on investment for our future.
And just to point out about the $6 million, we can't use it to pay down current liabilities.
No.
I just want to make that clear to everybody as they're thinking, why don't you pay $6 million down? We can't do that.
Yeah, that is specifically prohibited.
So,
Marchant?
just one other thing on the increase in revenues. So, I know some of the work Director Mills had done in taking us to TD Bank was going to result in some new interest revenue for us. Are there additional accounts that we can consider?
So, yes, so right now, the annual interest rate is 0.2. So the banks have tons of reserves and they don't, let's say, have a lot of customers. So our return on investment with that is not as competitive as it was last year, okay, which is 0.5, which is not much either, exactly. But we are having some savings, and we are also on the expenditure side with my staff in the finance department. We have been nitpicking every expense and every invoice, and we've had a fair amount of reductions in overbilling that we have found, and we have some savings, quite a bit savings actually. So there is room for looking at things in the fee area. I think there's some room in the building department. What are we charging? Are we getting our fair share development fees? We put some checks and balances in, so the finance department is reviewing that. So there is some possibilities, and I think everything matters, right? So I think looking at every piece could do a decent amount of savings, but clearly it's not going to take the 165 or 166 million of the liabilities out.
How about you mentioned the fair share development fees. So as a council, we had to vote on that. And I say had to loosely vote on that last December. We were told that we had to do that. And I know that I believe we unanimously approved the number that was put in front of us, which was a significant decrease from, I think it was around $7,000 to $5,000, something like that. But now that we're looking at $48 million in capital improvements, I still don't understand the numbers on how that went down by $2,000.
We actually asked for a second meeting to better understand the numbers.
Yeah. So I think that's an area, I don't know how we're collecting ideas, but that feels like an area that was a missed opportunity that we need to revisit here now that we're seeing
It was
the
missed then, but we can pick it up and take it on now. I think, so when we talk about increasing revenues, I want to talk about kind of the whole picture, decreasing expenses, the debt, leveraging our assets, all of these things, we have to take a holistic approach and figure it all out from scratch. So the fair share development fees, I think it needs a completely new study that's looking at our actual CIP. I want to do a strategic planning process where we kind of beef up our CIP, because I don't know what the criteria was to form that prior list, but I bet that list is deficient and missing a lot of big areas that, we're going to come across as we ask this question to comb through it a little with more detail and more rigor. The decreases in expenses are great. I mean, yeah, Ms. Mills and Mr. Houghton, they've each found, $800 a month we're saving on cell phone plans that we're not using, that we've eliminated, on life insurance premiums for people that are long gone. Some really simple low-hanging fruit that we're very
just retired
and beyond. So we're trying to find everything we can, and we're actively looking, but these are things that we're just happening upon before we even go through a comprehensive performance evaluation of everything we're doing. So we are going to look at decreasing expenses. Some of the big decreases in expenses are on our debt. Ms. Mills has been actively working to refinance some of our debt. All of our sewer debt that can be refinanced has been refinanced, and we're getting, is that the RIP? We saved $37,000 off of that, off that one. It's a one-time. That's the total savings. That's a function of how RIB operates. They collect all the savings and then they give us a token rebate. So we got 37,000 for that. We're looking at refunding or refinancing some of our non-taxable GO bonds. And it's going to take quite a bit more work, but estimated, we're looking at a savings of 456,000 over the life of the debt. And that could improve or depending on how markets go.
Mr. Marchant, I know that you and Director Mills, our IT director, it sounds like you're finding some big wins for the town. It would be great to hear about these in a public session so they can be recognized. I don't know about others, but many times people will ask me, why does this cost so much? Or what are they doing over at town hall? And just providing transparency around the value that you're providing would be wonderful.
So this is the platform that we're introducing some of these savings. But because we're in the middle of so many procedures, we're just trying to keep track of them so that we can do a comprehensive report. Maybe it's on her anniversary or maybe it's on my anniversary. After 1 year, this is what we've been able to accomplish, but certainly ahead of passing the next budget, because we want to show that level of conscientious effort and upholding the trust of the taxpayers that we're doing our jobs and looking out for their best interests.
If there's any incentive that the town council can provide, for every $500,000, we'll do town council sponsored ice cream social.
Excuse
Let
me,
us know.
we just attended a training on the ethics.
How about a dump tape?
We did-
You do
We
a
won't buy
dump
anyone more than
tape.
$25 worth of ice cream a year.
We just did an ethics training this morning. Yes.
So there are certain things that we can look at doing that can add enthusiasm and focus. But I think some of the changes are going to be more difficult because it's going to require changes to ordinances. Some of these are going to be changes to policies and operations of how we do business among the employee staff of the town. And you know how people love change. Some people can be very resistant even to the idea of it. And so this is going to be a period of growing pains, but I didn't bring a sandbox for the people that wanted to put their head in it because this is the reality and it's not going to get better just ignoring it. So we can decrease expenses with staffing. It's either reductions in force or deriving more value of the existing resources we have, better allocating the staffing resources, getting more productivity out of the staff. Operationally, that's some of the areas that we're finding. We've had some wins and we can go into that more detail later. Debt, you either directly pay it down or you refinance it to reduce some of your costs. Specifically on the pensions, we're looking at what our options are for kind of restructuring the model and how we can move forward on that. And then leveraging our assets. If we're going to take on any project, and I know Mr. McGee brought up an item for consideration that's been considered in the past, but I really like it as a poster child model of something that you can invest in that gives you an immediate return on investment and value to the town. And we'll discuss that at our strategic planning meeting. But what I'm getting at is a resource center for mulching and composting and managing our own yard and storm and tree debris waste. Taking it to the landfill, we're paying money for every ton that we dump. And yet that could be repurposed and used throughout parks. We could make it available to residents and we could save a lot of those expenses operationally if we're managing more of our own stuff. It'll take a commitment of resources to do it, but I think every project that we look at, we're going to have to be looking at what's the return on the investment. Is this the best use of our funds? Well, I'll just jump to my last slide. Questions to ask for steering a prudent financial course. Is this really needed? Is this a good, responsible use of tax dollars? Will this serve the public interest? Will this be sustainable? Will this be a meaningful and impactful investment of limited public funds? Will this investment help reduce the tax burden? Sometimes I mean, if we could say yes to all of them, then those are your no-brainers. Let's do it. The capital lease program, the enterprise fleet management program, where we're saving direct dollars and it's fulfilling all of those, that's a big win. And I commend the council for seeing the value in that and acting on it. So we're going to keep looking for programs and instances like that where we can maximize our efforts. Sometimes there isn't going to be a return on the investment because sometimes you just need to buy something and it just has to cost you. But then you're going to look at, well, is it really needed? This is a critical service and it's just what you have to do. So we're looking at everything. And with that, I will conclude my remarks and ask for any final questions.
Okay. We do have public comment, so we'll open public comment. We've had it throughout the entire evening. Other comments that people would like to make, and if you are on Zoom with us, please raise your hand so that we can call on you. Is there anyone member of the public here who would like to make a statement or make a comment?
It again. Luke Murray, 121 Hill Farm Camp Road. First of all, I want to thank the town manager and finance director. I think you did an excellent job tonight. Something that's long overdue, and you made a lot of valid points. The numbers don't lie. I've seen them in the past. I've seen them for years. We all have. It is no secret on the pension and OPEB liabilities. If you talk to Greg LeBassenaire, former councilman, he'll talk your ear off about the ARC and how they finally got that funded. And there was a strategic plan to do some of that, but there was a large hole and it's going to be tough to get out of. It's going to take time. So I do want to thank you. And I agree with many of your points. I would agree that the capital improvement program needs to be markedly improved. If you look at many other communities that do it, a lot of it sits with finance, not planning. Planning should be a role, but it's really a finance document. You really need to look at facilities and involve all departments, and it typically can sit alone, and ours doesn't. It sits as a small portion of a very large budget. So something that I think could be improved, and the value proposition to the community can be conveyed through that, right? What are we doing to move the ball forward? So I know that's one of many things. One thing I just wanted to also address is, and it was brought up tonight, is the ARP funds, and there was $6 million thrown out there, and it is restricted for water and sewer. We don't manage water. Kent County typically does, or people have wells, but we do have a sewer program. And I know I live in Western, and it pains me to say this, but I really do think that very quickly the sewer program needs to be looked at, because this is an opportunity. I understand that we feed $200,000 a year into the program, but if you upgrade the program and you increase user tie-in, there may be an opportunity to stop that, right? Stop some of the bleeding. I understand that we have an enormous amount of flow to West Warwick. We need to maybe increase the flow to get more to West Warwick and use some of that capacity. In Warwick, I know that Mayor Picozzi finally got Bayside Sewers to move forward because he took the assessments from 40,000, supplemented with ARP funds to get it down to a fixed fee of about 16,000. And that made it affordable for people along, especially the coastline, to afford those sewers instead of look at an OWTS system and say, maybe I can't even put that on my lot. Now it's the conventional system. Now we have Tioga Lake. We know that there's bacteria counts that typically kick us out. We have sensitive environmental habitat along the rivers. So this may be an opportunity. So while it pains me to even say, open this up and the dialogue on a very painful issue, pragmatically, I think it really deserves immediate attention. I believe those funds are only valid for 2 years, right? They're going to expire in a couple of years. If we don't use that money, that is basically free money. It's taxpayer money, but given to us, and it's a real opportunity. It's a short term. So I'm not saying it should necessarily move forward. I'm saying it should be looked at as a resident taxpayer. I think it's a way out. Maybe there's some creativity in that could be done to get us out of a hole, or a bit of a hole, with some money that's opportunistic at the current time. I think the only other things we could spend it on is broadband, maybe affordable housing, some other things. I don't think we're well positioned to do at this point. So, and last thing I'll say is there's always a hesitancy to invest in planning. I would say as a council to support the town manager in whatever additional assets to do. And when I say planning, I mean direct planning, growth planning, comprehensive planning, but also things like the capital improvement plan. Staff resources are thin. And so when you come to budget time, budgets are a statement of your priorities. And if your priority is to actually set us up for the future, we may have to increase either it be direct staff or outside staff, support systems to assist the town manager and the operations here to get a capital improvement plan done, to do an annual report that proposes the value proposition to the community. That's maybe an annual report that's done every year. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Any other comments from members of the public? So before we conclude, I'd like to and adjourn, I'd like to ask each member of the council if he or she would like to make any comments. We'll start with Vice President Ludwig.
Thank you, President Dixon. I think one of the smartest things we did earlier this year as a council, just slightly before Councilwoman Lima joined us, was to hire town manager Marchant. And the strategic direction that we're looking for, the discussions that we want, the professionalism, the facts. I feel like that's what we're getting tonight, and that's what we've been pushing for. And it's something that I feel like as a council, we've been pretty consistent in the messaging. Transparency, documentation, what are the facts, give us all the information. So thank you very much. And thank you, Director Mills, for your attention on this as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ludwig. Mr. LeBlanc?
Thank you, President Dixon. I just want to say thank you to Mr. Marchant and Ms. Mills for the time and effort to put this presentation together. It was very informative. I really appreciated it. Going back to one of the comments, I think you said that we've received about $5 million so far in COVID funds. Is that an accurate statement? Or 5 or 6? Almost 6?
Yeah, it's almost 6.
So I've seen other towns, they're trying to plan and be very smart with that money. And by hiring outside counsel to look at all the expenses and try to get the best return on that money. Because I think, we haven't had a meeting on this. I've been asking for quite some time on how much we're actually going to get. I think it's a little north of 10 million. I think it might be prudent of us to perhaps go to RFP on something like that, just so that.
RFP to how to utilize the funds?
Yes, in the most efficient and stretch every single dollar possible without getting maybe just Mr. Marchant's opinion or just your opinion on how to spend it.
I'll hand it over to Mr. Marchant. I've been involved in finance directors calls. There's finance directors from every municipality. There is a small handful of municipalities that are spending that money to do that. And most are at the very least having a meeting and bringing in the taxpayers and having the town manager and the finance director come up with a plan to present for the town council and the citizens, and for them to get direction from them. So there is limited use, but Mr. Marchant can comment more on that if you'd like.
If I could just add a little bit of color, I was thinking maybe a third party that's independent, that can look at the full scope of all of our debt, all the projects that are necessary, and give us just an independent decision on how to use the funds. That's all.
Can't use it on debt, so we can't use the COVID money. So we could certainly let's definitely entertain. I'll look into that for you, and I'll talk to a couple of finance directors that use a third party. But we definitely can't use it to pay down debt. Okay, so
I was just looking at our full picture.
Yeah, I understand your overall question. Thank you.
So I guess I'm reluctant to expend money on resources that are going to tell me what I already know, because that would not be an efficient use of funds. And so my approach to management is, we don't have our solicitor here tonight because I didn't think it would be necessary to pay the money to have him here tonight. Had something come up and we would have needed them, I have them on speed dial, but I think, it could be a good investment if you're really behind the eight ball to hire a consultant to tell you how best to spend the funds. But our needs are pretty clear to me and pretty well established. And so I think that's something we could look at, and I would want to see what other communities are doing and how much value it's getting for them versus what we think that value could be for us. But we are talking about spending a lot of money. And so I do want to get the best bang for the buck, and I'm open to looking into that.
100%. I don't remember the last time that we received about $10 million and with all the strings attached. And I thought I heard you say that we have until 2024 to spend some of it, but I've also read that we have until 2026, depending on how you spend it. So again, it's just a full scope, full picture. How can we spend $10 million?
Now it's kind of like hiring not a grant writer, but a grant coordinator, because there are so many strings to keep track of that you could hire a consultant to help you maintain your federal reporting requirements that go beyond the staff time of finance or me to do. And so I do see a role for certain consulting professionals, not telling us how to spend the money, but how to track the money we've spent.
Thank you. Mrs. Lima?
I defer to the Mr. Veazey in front who had a comment.
Mr. Veazey, please state your name and address, please.
Ted Veazey, north of Platte Road. I just want to express thanks again to Mr. Marchant and say from my perspective, it's my only experience with both of these people, but they have a complete command of what's going on in the town. And I agree with him that it would be a waste of money to ask a consultant to come in to ask them what the problems are and then present a solution. So thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Mrs. Lima?
Thank you to Mr. Marchant and Ms. Mills for putting this together. Really appreciate it. My only comment right now would be, and I brought this up at budget time as well, two things. One, communicating, and this pulls off of what Mr. Murray said, communicating value of what people are getting. I said this at budget time. We take their money, but we don't say what they got for it. Or, there's obvious things like, yes, it funds necessary services or trash pickup, but no one really knows what return on their investment they're getting. So I think finding creative ways to communicate that more would be helpful. So just pulling off of Mr. Murray's point. And then the other piece is, I know that this presentation is going to be up on the website, but I think the context that you both added is pretty necessary to really understand this. My marketing mind kind of goes to, how do we put a one pager together with layman's terms of what this means of the quick hits? So I just want to make sure that moving forward, because I'm semi-confident I could communicate the quick hits of this, but I think if we found a way to be able to communicate that in layman's terms. I know you define things, but still maybe not as layman's terms as we could be.
I think we could fit it on an 11 by 8.5 feet page.
But I don't know if anyone else agrees, but just a thought.
Well, thank you for that suggestion, Mrs. Lima. Before we entered the budget season, we invited each department head to come to the town council to make a presentation about the work of the department. That was our beginning efforts to show the community the value that these departments are providing. And some of them provided a very, very good, I would say, synopsis of what they're doing. Lots of value added. Some were not as strong as others, but it was our beginning attempt, and we need to do more of that.
And I think it should go to the future, right? So it's what are you getting if this budget passes? The tangible things I think people need to understand. I think people just hear increase and they think what for? And so understanding the situation at a very at a layman's term level, I think is important. And I know it's a little long tonight, but I think all the detail that we received is necessary. So those are my only comments. Thanks.
Thank you. Point well taken. Mrs. Shockley.
No, I wanted to say thank you as a new council member, part of a new council with new town management and finance direction. Getting this, I think, helps us all to know where we are right now. I hope that it has benefited the people on Zoom and in this room and who might watch this at a later date. And I think it's a great step one as we are RFPing for a performance audit, RFPing for a comprehensive plan. We're planning a strategic planning session as a council. These are all steps we're taking to not just understand where we are, but where we can go. So this was a very important step and I very much appreciate it. And as someone who enjoys my town and enjoys living here, it is really great to know that we know where we are, so we can know where we're going. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's sort of in summary, the town council is faced with very important policy and financial decisions to make. And some of these will come very immediately toward us, whether it's just approving a budget item for another truck or whether it's something much more significant than that. We need to face these decisions and we need information. And so this is why it was so valuable for all of us, not only the council members, but the public, to understand what is the financial health of our community. I have never seen a program like this, certainly not in Coventry. And I think that we have a very clear picture. I think that I would like to have a little bit more suggestion, maybe from both of you, if you could suggest what's the next step that the council should be thinking about or taking at this point in time before we have to make these important decisions. I mean, you laid out a lot of tasks that need to be done, some policies, ordinances that need to be changed, decisions we have to make. What's the next step for us as a council?
The next step has already been scheduled, and that's going to be the strategic planning retreat, where we're going to take at least 6 hours out of a day to hash through every possible solution that we can find to move this town forward. Some of it will be capital, some of it will be expenses, some of it we have to look at ordinances and how we do things. We need to look at everything, and dedicating the time to really go through all of that and getting marching orders for how to proceed is where we're going to take that. Once we have articulated, it sounds like a lot because it is a lot, but coming out of a strategic planning session, we aren't going to have every detail figured out, but we should have a very clear idea of what our mission and vision is, for what our priorities are, for what the values of the community are, and how we're going to prioritize every new expense that comes before the town council, and say, okay, this fails to meet the financial sustainability test. We can't consider this right now. This does, so we're going to invest our efforts in this direction rather than that direction. Whether it's financial sustainability, whether it is environmental, customer service, services, parks, whatever the issues are, we need that level of community values and priorities that the town council is going to champion and embrace. And that will tell the directors of every department what their priority focus needs to be as they go about building their budget. And then we're going to be working towards building the 2023 budget, and hopefully in the spring have many more public meetings so that the people of this town can appreciate what they're getting for their money, how the resources are being used, and how we can move the community ahead. Bigger projects, I think changing some of the ordinances and looking at some of the bigger programs are going to take more time than maybe the next 9 months. But at least at the strategic planning meeting, we'll be able to at least put our priority list together and then start putting in timetables, schedules, and projections.
So remind the public, what is the date of our strategic planning meeting?
I believe it is Saturday, November 13th.
And it is a public meeting.
It is a public meeting, venue to be determined, and we'll make sure there's adequate accommodations for anyone who would like to attend.
Thank you.
One more thing.
Yes.
I just wanted to, the other thing I meant to say was, I think the last slide of this presentation is a good concept that we should be encouraged to think about for every single thing. And so if that's something we can even expand upon in our session, I think that would be helpful. Just anything that comes in front of this council, does it do A, does it do B, does it do C, does it so on? I think that's really, I appreciated that.
Thank you. And because you opened that door, I'm going to walk through it. I stuck my little tagline from the budget on the footnote of that slide. Today's decisions determine tomorrow's opportunities.
Yes.
And I think that's so true and so important to remember.
Okay. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion? Roll call vote, Mrs. Shockley,
Yes.
Mrs. Lima,
Yes.
Ms. Ludwig,
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc,
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon. Yes, 5 yeas, no nays. The motion to adjourn passes at 8:22. Thank you.